Hi, I'm Giannotti from the University of Birmingham, and in this video I will be talking about laws of ground and fundamentality. This is part of a work in progress paper, so I look forward to reading your comments, and I hope you will enjoy. So let me start by introducing the notion of ground. Many important philosophical questions involve a kind of non-causal priority. Here you have some examples. Do mental facts obtain in virtue of neurophysiological facts? Are moral facts based on non-moral facts? Is knowledge prior to justification? Do states of affairs depend on their constituents? Ground is supposed to illuminate the metaphysical dependence at play in these questions. In a slightly more precise way, we can say that ground is a primitive form of non-causal determination with explanatory import among facts. For the purposes of this talk, we can think of facts as structured entities involving individual properties and other worldly items. We could say that a fact, or a plurality of facts F, grounds a fact G, just in case F non-causally metaphysically determines G. But this formulation is not very illuminating because ground is supposed to be a primitive notion. There are two views about the explanatory import of ground. One is unionism, which says that ground is metaphysical explanation. The other is separatism, and this states that ground backs or supports metaphysical explanation. We do not need to choose sides here, but these views clarify the explanatory import of ground. And here you have some examples of grounding claims where the fact that is grounded is supposed to be metaphysically determined and in some sense explained by the facts or fact that do the grounding. The fact that torture is wrong is grounded in the fact that its practice is harmful. The fact that A and B is true is grounded in the fact that A is true and B is true. And next we have a legal case. The fact that it is illegal to keep a tiger as a pet in Princeton is grounded in some legal and non-legal facts. Another example, the fact that a singleton set hypatia exists is grounded in the fact that hypatia exists. And lastly, we have a case from social metaphysics. The fact that an institution is racist is grounded in the fact that it perpetuates racial oppression. There's an intricate debate about the features of ground. Here we need to make just 3 points. First, ground is factive. Whenever A grounds B, both A and B obtain. Second, I'm going to focus on the orthodox view of ground. Accordingly, I take ground to be reflexive, asymmetric, and transitive. And lastly, we need to acknowledge an important distinction between full and partial grounds. A full ground is akin to a complete explanation of a target phenomenon. A partial ground is akin to a contributory part of that complete explanation. The relationship between partial and full ground is standardly regimented by a principle of completability. This says that if A is a partial ground of B, then there is a set of facts, gamma, that includes A, and gamma fully grounds B. Here's an unfamiliar question. What grounds facts of ground? That is, if A grounds B, what grounds the fact that A grounds B? The paper from which this presentation is derived is meant to elucidate this question, which is called the questions of iterated ground. So what I want to do in this talk is discussing what I call nomic or connectivist approaches to the iterated ground questions. These views invoke laws of grounds to ground grounding facts, and some of these are committed to the intriguing claim that some grounding laws are fundamental. My aim is to show that widely shared assumptions about ground threaten the fundamentality of grounding laws, and I will argue that available solutions have theoretical undesirable consequences. So here's the plan for the rest of the talk. Next, I will give a brief overview of nomic approaches. Then I will discuss what I call the fundamentality argument. This is an argument against the fundamentality of grounding laws. And I will conclude the talk by discussing some options to resist the conclusion of the fundamentality argument. Some theorists of ground believe that grounding facts are grounded in laws of ground, and we can think of these as general ground-theoretic connections that play a role similar to that of laws of nature, but for metaphysical goings-on. You might think that as laws of nature connect causes and effects, laws of ground connect facts that do the grounding,
with facts about what is grounded. On nomic approaches, the fact that A grounds B is grounded, at least partially, in some law of ground that facts like A grounds fact like B. Of course, there's an important discussion to be had about what motivates nomic approaches, but unfortunately, here we cannot have it. Diversity abounds among nomic approaches. We can find essentialist views, functionalist views, deductive nomological models, and Humean accounts. And if you want to know more about the last view, feel free to get in touch. Here I cannot illustrate these views in detail, but feel free to ask me in the comments. Despite specific differences, we might say the nomic approaches, or at least some of them, take laws of grounds to be variations of the schema that you have here on the slide. You might want to stop the video to have a look at the schema, but this says, in words, that for any fact X having some constituents such and such related, and for any fact Y having some constituents so and so related, X partially or fully grounds Y. So let me give you a toy example to illustrate. Suppose that the fact that Nilde's shirt is cerulean grounds the fact that Nilde's shirt is blue. The question that we want to answer is this. What grounds the fact that Nilde's shirt is cerulean grounds Nilde's shirt is blue? On nomic approaches, the full ground of this grounding fact includes a law of ground like what I call cerulean. This is the law that for any fact X and for any fact Y, if X has some object instantiating the property of being cerulean, and Y has the object instantiating the property of being blue, then X partially or fully grounds Y. So far, I sketched an overview of nomic approaches, and now I turn to discuss the fundamentality argument against fundamental grounding laws. And to do so, we need three assumptions and a clarification. The first assumption is that laws of grounds are facts. The second assumption is that instances of laws of grounds are facts. These two assumptions are needed to block category mistake types of objection from the get-go. The third assumption is slightly more controversial, so feel free to ask me during the Q&A. And this is a restriction to positive instances of laws of ground. I take positive instances to be obtaining facts that involve individuals and instances of properties and relations that figure in the laws. So for example, a positive instance of the law all F's are G's is a fact like FA and GA. A fact like not FA or GA is not a positive instance. In essence, the third assumption blocks certain logically equivalent facts from being positive instances of laws of grounds. And as I said, feel free to ask me in the comments why we need this assumption. And now a clarification. I will discuss the fundamentality of facts, and this has to be distinguished from the fundamentality of the constituents of facts, such as objects, properties, concepts, and so on. So here's the fundamentality thesis. Some laws of grounds are fundamental. Such a thesis enjoys popularity among nomic approaches. Here I only included a couple of references as textual evidence, but you can find more in the literature. We have Schaffer, who argues that some laws of metaphysics must be fundamental. By fundamental, I mean that there are ungrounded facts about the existence of these entities. And we have another quote from Welsh. The laws of grounds are the independent dynamic postulates that God would have to decree in addition to the instantiations of fundamental properties and relations. Again, we can have a discussion during the Q&A about why some people endorse this thesis. Now we can discuss the fundamentality argument. In its simplest form, it goes like this. Premise 1 is what I call minimalism. Laws of grounds are true universal generalizations. Premise 2 is what I call the platitude. true universal generalizations are partially grounded in their instances, and premise-free is what I call ungroundedness, and this is the definition of the fundamental. A fact is fundamental if and only if it is ungrounded. The conclusion of this argument is that laws of grounds are not fundamental. And obviously, the conclusion is the denial of the fundamentality thesis. Before discussing a few options to resist the fundamentality argument and related problems, let me spend a few words on minimalism, the claim that laws of ground are true universal generalization. Why would anyone be attracted to this claim in the first place? Well, it seems to me that laws of ground should possess two features, which I call generality and modal force. Laws of ground ought to be general because they are meant to govern or describe the connections among all facts of a certain sort. And laws of ground ought to be modally strong because they're meant to govern or describe all actual as well as possible connections among facts of a certain sort. So it seems to me that a conception of laws of ground as true universal generalization, as expressed by universally quantified conditionals, satisfies both the features of generality and modal force. This conception is minimal because extra bells and whistles are negotiable. Now, there are three main strategies to resist the conclusion of the fundamentality argument. We can reject minimalism, we can reject the platitudes, or we can reject ungroundedness. The first two moves can be regarded as primitivist solutions because they imply that there is something brute about the laws of ground. The third move, instead, is a separatist strategy, in the sense that it implies that ground and fundamentality come apart. My claim is that each of these options has unwelcome consequences, and in what follows I'm going to point out some problems with these moves. Of course, none of these problems is conclusive, but let me know what you think and your solutions in the comments. The first strategy is to reject minimalism, and this is a popular move. For example, it is endorsed by Martin Glazier and Gideon Rosen, and other essentialists follow this approach. However, this strategy gives rise to two problems. The first problem is that of unexplained generality. If laws of grounds are true universal generalizations, we have a straightforward explanation of their general character. But if we give up minimalism, it is unclear from where laws get their general character. The second problem is that the rejection of minimalism opens the door to skepticism concerning the lawhood of laws of ground. Now, this might be a good thing for nomic deflationists, anti-realists and instrumentalists and the like. But it doesn't seem to be good news for realists about the grounding laws. A second option is to reject the platitudes. However, also this strategy faces two problems. The first is that this strategy offends against the logic of ground. If we reject the platitudes, we deny one of the obvious rules of the logic of ground. So the problem with this approach is that it is logically revisionary. The second problem is, again, one of unexplained generality. If we reject the platitude, it is unclear from where the laws of grounds get their general character, and any good account should provide an explanation of the generality of laws of ground. The third strategy to resist the fundamentality argument is to reject ungroundedness. But also in this case, we have a couple of problems. First, it seems that this strategy creates a problematic ideological tension with the fundamentality thesis. A theoretical justification for positing ground is that it permits us to analyze the fundamental as that which is ungrounded. Now remember that we are attempting to defend the fundamentality of grounding laws. So ground is already part of our toolkit. And this means that we could appeal to the ungroundedness for free. But on this strategy, we keep ground but deny ungroundedness for defending the fundamentality of grounding laws. And this is weird. It is a bit like adopting a dog, but you are doing the barking. The second problem is that the resulting view is unparsimonious. We need ground and another concept to characterize the fundamentality of the laws of ground. So it seems to me that a strategy that escapes these problems is preferable by the yardstick of ideological coherency and parsimony. I wish to conclude this talk by discussing an interesting approach to escape some of these problems. An alternative option is to adopt a definition of the fundamental in terms of the all grounding, namely that which grounds everything else. More precisely, following Leuenberger, we can say that a fact is fundamental just in case it belongs to every grounding base. And a grounding base can be defined as the set of all facts such that any fact that is not included in the base is grounded by a subset of the facts included in the base. Now, at first look, it seems that if we adopt this definition of the fundamental as the all-grounding, or what I call all-groundedness here, we can escape the problems that the rejection of ungroundedness, so the previous strategies, creates. But of course, trouble is just around the corner. Leuenberger has recently shown that ungroundedness and all-groundedness are logically equivalent. And therefore, if a law of ground belongs to every grounding base, namely it is all grounding, then it is also ungrounded. But if we retain minimalism and the platitude, then the all grounding law is not ungrounded. And if such a law it is not ungrounded, then it is not all grounding either. Thus it appears that the appeal to all groundedness on its own does not allow us to resist the fundamentality argument. Of course, the big question is whether ungroundedness and all-groundedness are logically equivalent. Now, Leuenberger argues that one way to break down the mutual entailment between ungroundedness and all-groundedness is to abandon the principle of completability of partial grounds into full grounds. Remember, this is the principle that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk. Now note that the rejection of completability marks a significant departure from the orthodox view of ground. And moreover, it allows for the possibility of fundamental facts that are merely partially grounded. But suppose that you are prepared to accept such consequences. If so, an interesting possibility emerges. Say that a fact is weakly a-fundamental, just in case it belongs to every full grounding base. And say that a fact is strongly u-fundamental if there is no set of facts that partially grounds it. Now, if we reject the completability principle, we can say that some laws of grounds are all grounding without these being wholly ungrounded. And this is to say that some laws of ground might be weakly a-fundamental, yet not strongly u-fundamental. The open question is whether weakly a-fundamental grounding laws are plausible. Note that such grounding laws are merely partially grounded. There is nothing that could fully ground them. And this implies that there is something inescapably brute or metaphysically unexplainable about why some weakly a-fundamental laws of ground obtain. Now the question is whether such a mystery is acceptable. Perhaps it is. Maybe hitting this mystery is a sign that we reached the end of the explanatory road. Okay, let me stop here. I discussed a fundamentality argument against the thesis that some grounding laws are fundamental. Then I briefly sketched three main options to resist these arguments by finding them problematic. So my conclusion for now is that the nomic approach theorist must show that the benefits of fundamental grounding laws outweigh the identified costs. It seems to me that there is more work that needs to be done for a theory of fundamental laws of ground.